Chapter 1. Living Clean. Living clean is a lifelong journey, and the NA program gives us the tools to build our life infused with hope. No matter where we are on our journey, we believe that it can get better and that we can get better. We practice living a principled life and find new ways to live. We try new things, and some of them suit us better than others. As we experience living clean with its ups and downs, miracles and struggles, dead ends and open doors, we see the world more clearly and better understand our place in it. The program of Narcotics Anonymous is the way we have found to escape lives of desperation and pain. But that's not all NA is. It is a path, a process, and a way of life. Many of us come in with just the barest hope that we can get the pain to stop. In the beginning, our willingness is born of suffering and fear. Living the program changes us in ways we might expect and in ways we never imagined. NA gives us the ability to turn our desperation into a passion to live fully and grow spiritually. We experience relief almost from the beginning of our recovery, and our first experiences of joy are like seeing color for the first time. Our minds are open and our spirits are free. Even if we experience it only for fleeting moments, that joy carries us through our hardest days and nights. It is not what we think about a recovery that matters. It is what we do. Living clean is a spiritual process, and it teaches us that the world is bigger than we imagined and as not far out of reach as we had feared. Our flawed beliefs about people who did not use drugs shaped our opinions about what we might be like when we stopped. When we first got clean, many of us worried that our lives were about to become small and boring. What we find really is beyond our wildest dreams. We have opportunities and the ability to follow through on them. Perhaps more importantly, our connections with people become intensely important and satisfying to us. The close friendships we have with members who share our recovery can be a deeper connection than family. We share an intimacy that is really special, and when we carry that over the course of many years, it grows into an abiding affection and understanding of one another. Commitment to recovery is essential for us. Maintaining recovery as a priority may come to mean different things for us over time. We need to maintain our connection to NA, but taking responsibility for our lives also matters. So many things compete for our attention, and as addicts, we have a tendency to think in extremes. All or nothing, right or wrong. Finding the balance is an ongoing negotiation. Attending meetings regularly does not have to mean every night of the week, but meetings continue to matter for our own well-being and for our ability to carry the message. Keeping that lifeline strong and ready is a matter of continuing maintenance. It gets easier when we let go of the idea that it ought to be hard. After many years of recovery, a member shared that he was finally able to answer the question, "Is it possible that life is really this simple?" with a simple yes. The principles we practice in NA have meaning throughout our lives. They offer us a way to stop using and to free ourselves to be ourselves. Working the steps, studying the traditions, and applying ourselves to service in and out of NA helps us to discover who we are and what we believe. Carrying the message brings us awareness of our gifts and limitations and guides us to change. We can measure our lives not in years or by the things we gain or lose, but by the degree to which we make peace with our own lives and the world around us. Spiritual growth is the real success. As our recovery unfolds, we find ourselves resolving feelings we never admitted we had. Open-mindedness gives us the ability to see more and more clearly within ourselves as we go through the never-ending process of surrendering, taking inventory, and inviting change. The message we carry has three parts. Any addict can stop using, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. We talk a lot about the first two because stopping is an emergency when we get here, and losing the obsession is necessary for us to enjoy our lives. But the hard work does not end there. Finding a new way to live is not something we do just once. Some of us experience great upheaval as we try again and again to find a life that makes sense for us. But we continue to carry the message, using our experience to help others. The more experience we have to share, the richer our message can become. Keys to freedom. As we practice these principles in our affairs, they gain traction in our lives, and they start feeling more natural. For example, in the beginning we may have to continuously practice being honest. As we continue this practice, we find dishonesty progressively more uncomfortable, perhaps even agonizing, and gradually we notice that honesty has become more normal for us. We are basically honest people, and we even like it. Some say this is how we know a higher power is involved, when our defects are removed. We may not feel them go. We may not even notice the change unless we fall back into the old behavior and find that it is no longer comfortable or workable for us. We call our sponsor distress or having done it again, or even because we are thinking about acting on the old defect, and realize how long it has been since that behavior crossed our minds. Learning to survive our impulses without acting out is a new freedom. Over time, the desire to act against our values begins to fade. Our self-made prisons no longer serve us. We are free to explore and discover what we are good at. We are free to participate, create, care and share, surprise ourselves, take risks, be vulnerable, and stand on our own 2 feet. We find our beliefs and begin to act on them. We make decisions based on our values. We walk through fear and wake up to the miracles that surround us. We are free to be who we are and live as we choose. When we feel the deepest gratitude, we can look back and see that our path to that moment was neither short nor straight. What seemed like the worst decisions at one time in our recovery opened the door for some of our greatest opportunities later on. We may simply outgrow some of our decisions. What was right for us at one point in our recovery may not be right for the rest of our lives, but it can be difficult for us to move on. Gifts can come wrapped in such strange packages that we do not always recognize them when they arrive. Nothing that happens is entirely good or entirely bad. We do not pretend that there are no mistakes in recovery, but sometimes those mistakes can take us in a direction that we had not thought of before. Recovery is not a standardizing cookie-cutter process. We do not all go through the process in the same way, and we do not all come out of it the same. But there are some familiar landmarks we pass. We have phases and stages, corners we turn, staircases we climb. Each of us has periods of intense growth and times when change is more subtle. Having a new way to live means that we have to live in new ways, and we can get confused or lost even when we have many years clean. Allowing each other room to grow at our own pace is difficult, especially when we care for each other. But self-acceptance and self-respect are the result of going through the process in our own way. Time is not the same as experience. Just because we have been here for a long time does not mean that we know everything we need to know. We do not graduate from the simple steps that keep us clean and free. Our lives continue to unfold. We start at different places and we grow at different paces. Time represents the opportunity for growth, but we still have to step up to the challenge and be open to the lessons. Practicing honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness keeps us teachable, grateful, and humble. The difference between humility and humiliation can be the level of acceptance we have about information we get. When we listen with an open mind, anyone can carry a message to us. There are no unnecessary principles in NA, though we may learn them in our own time and in our own order. We cannot expect to find what we are looking for if we work some of the steps and not others, or if we are ignoring the traditions or living in conflict with our own values. Spiritual principles are not dependent on time or circumstance. We learn by observation and experience. There is a difference between feeling like we are so sick that we will never get better and knowing that we will never be done growing or recovering. Exploration lasts a lifetime. We begin over and over. It gets easier to act on our own best interest even when we are feeling resistant. A member shared, "I often hear newcomers say that they cannot imagine going to NA meetings for the rest of their lives. I had the same reservation, but today I cannot imagine my life without NA." We learn to do what we have to do, as well as what we want to do. We do not always want to work our program, but we know the rewards we get when we take responsibility for our recovery and the consequences when we do not. New information can be hard for us to accept when it does not come to us in the way we think it should. Whether the information itself is surprising or the messenger is not someone we usually look to for guidance, we may dismiss new ideas because we do not like the package. A member shared, "I would stand on my head in a corner if my sponsor told me it would work. But when the words that could save my life come from someone I really do not care for, it is easy to dismiss them." New tools are available to us when we allow ourselves to be surprised by both the message and the messenger. If it brings us to reevaluate our belief system, so much the better. We can see our initial resistance as a reservation in our willingness. Trying new things in recovery is one way we keep ourselves from getting stuck. No matter how long we have been clean, we can go to meetings and listen for the music. It's like when your ears pop, a member shared. Suddenly I could hear what I did not know I was missing before. Our traditions teach us that in NA there are no classes of membership. It follows that the new member is as likely to save the life of the old-timer as the reverse. When we stay open to that reality, many of the limitations we set for ourselves disappear. We teach by example. Even when we are teaching what not to do, we are still carrying a message. Sharing our experience gives it meaning and value. Our hope is that the next member will do better than we did, that they can learn from our mistakes. It does not always work. We are people who tend to learn things the hard way. But when a member with 2 years clean shares with us the experience we had at 10 years clean kept them from doing the same thing, we know that we are getting better, personally and as a fellowship. Wisdom is building on past experience to cope with new events. When we think about our lives now in contrast to our active addiction, it is important to remember that it is not where we have been that counts, but where we are going. But where we have been in recovery is the foundation of our wisdom. We learn from our experience, and we use it to help others. Our wisdom grows as we learn to see ourselves honestly without judging or jumping to conclusions. Growing pains. Sooner or later we experience a particular kind of opportunity or catastrophe we had not heard about in meetings. Sometimes an event like a breakup, the loss of a job, or changes in our family triggers a flow of feelings and it does not stop. Grief, hardship, or betrayal can make us feel terribly lonely. Occasionally we experience physical changes that bring emotional freight with them, including depression, anxiety, and deep fear. There are also times when we find ourselves in crisis even though the circumstances of our lives look pretty good. Even the excitement of living our dreams, taking on a new career, moving to a faraway place, creating a family can make us feel like we do not belong. Sometimes an outside event starts the ball rolling. At other times, a cascade of emotions seem to start from nowhere. It can feel like we are backed into a corner, even if nothing is really happening at all. Once we have been through this feeling and survived it clean, we know it won't last forever. But that does not mean we can see our way out. We come through these experiences with a deepened understanding and faith in our recovery. Through hard work and grace, if we keep coming back, we do get free. Eventually, all of us come to an emotional crisis in recovery. We start wondering if recovery will last, or if we had just gotten a brief reprieve and we are about to go crazy again. A member shared, "My life seemed stable by outward appearances, but inside I was a mess. I was clean, but miserable, reactive, and fearful." We find ourselves in these dark places sometimes with many years clean. We deal with our addiction, but some of our underlying issues remain untouched. Long-buried emotions come pouring to the surface, and we may or may not have the tools to deal with them. As I discovered things about myself, a member shared, "My emotions started to run amok." There are no bitter ends in recovery, but sometimes it feels like that's where we are. Recovery gives us a new chance at life. Sometimes we have to accept that invitation more than once. The bottoms we hit in recovery can be frightening. We go through some dark times when we're in pain. It can be hard to reach out and easier to see differences. But even in the darkness, the process is still going on. When NA members say, "Don't give up 5 minutes before the miracle," we're not just talking about the first one. Our lives are full of moments when we are faced with a difficult decision to grow or go. Many of us leave not when things are horrible, but when we have one more spiritual hump to get over. We lose our way right before the miracle, sometimes again and again. The faith that leads us to build a successful life may not be sufficient to sustain that day after day. A new kind of surrender is necessary if we are to stay clean and keep growing. Spiritual growth can be bewildering, frightening, and very lonely. Some of us give up on the process at this crucial point when there is nothing left to blame or change but ourselves. Selfishness and self-centeredness die hard. But we can get through it with the help of others who have survived this passage, and we find great gifts are waiting for us on the other side. What we heard when we were new still stands. Keep coming back, no matter what. Many of the challenges we face have concrete symptoms, but are actually spiritual in nature. It is hard to spot a spiritual crisis. Usually it is disguised as a crisis in our relationships, finances, career, or family. When we are in crisis, we may try all kinds of escapes and excuses before we resort to the steps. We can be intolerant, angry, defensive, vengeful, guilty, and resentful, testing the patience and tolerance of those around us. The only way out is through we must roll up our sleeves and get to work. These struggles often push us into the next phase in our recovery. We can come out stronger and healthier people for the experience if we are willing to do the work. Early in recovery, we were told that if we kept coming to meetings, sooner or later we would hear our story. It It would be a mistake to think that our using story is the only one we need to listen for. Our recovery story is no less dramatic, and there are times when we need just as much to go to meetings and listen for that. We hear it when we learn to listen with our heart as well as our ears. Sometimes we have to go looking for it, seeking new meetings, asking around, and sharing about what's going on. We find people who have been through what we're going through and got through it clean. We need other people to walk us through hard times, and we need to reach out and help others as we heal. There is hope. When we listen to others share their pain and how they get through it, we get a broader view. We see new tools in action, and we can learn to use their experience to go forward in our own lives. When we change our attitude or perspective, we can find a new sense of compassion and gratitude. Perhaps the most valuable lesson of all is empathy. However, empathy is not a treatment plan. It is a way of life. When we can relate with one another and see each other's growth, we begin to believe in the possibility of our own recovery. Listening to other addicts share without judging them is the beginning of listening to our own heart without judgment or punishment. When we have compassion for ourselves, we give ourselves permission to be in the world, and that makes us much more useful to the world. Our ability to feel joy and gratitude can be a direct result of the suffering we have endured. Staying clean is not a guarantee that nothing bad will happen, but the principles in the steps teach us how to live on life's terms and give us the courage, strength, and wisdom to stay clean no matter what. We're able to live lives of joy and purpose no matter what we have been through. Faith is what keeps us doing the footwork even when we cannot see the reason. One of the benefits of reaching out is finding that our most painful experiences can help someone else. When we say, "I've been through that, and I stay clean," we realize with gratitude that we have gotten to the other side of something we had feared we could not get through. There's great satisfaction in being able not to just look back, but to reach back and help someone else across. Getting through hard times strengthens our faith. When we are grappling with issues that do not have easy answers, we experience our greatest growth. One member suggested, there are spiritual tourists and spiritual explorers. One plays it very safe, and the other will step right out there and try God out. We get more certain of that relationship as we go. As we mature in recovery, we learn to be comfortable with the hard questions rather than only feeling okay when we think we've settled them. Having all the answers makes it hard to be teachable. Often when we say we are looking for solutions, what we're really seeking is control. Over and over we go looking for the answers, but there really are not that many to find, and we do not need that many. The steps help us to increase our ability to be honest with ourselves and others. More often and sooner in the process, we are able to recognize our responsibility for our actions and motives. Identifying what drives us to act as we do helps us to find relief from all the ways our disease shows up. It also gives us the ability to see more clearly. We begin to move toward what we want rather than just away from what we fear. Each time we let go, there is a degree of mourning and then an opening of possibility. Each time we get through that process, we find new freedom in ourselves. But it can take years to let go enough to feel that freedom. We hang on fiercely, mistaking the attempt to control all the variables in our lives for vigilance in our recovery. Letting go looks different at different times in our recovery. Making peace with loss is one way we learn acceptance. When we experience loss and find that we still feel complete within ourselves, something changes. The feeling that we must constantly fight for our survival starts to ease. We can let someone else be right or let something go without losing ourselves or our dignity. We can see our part in situations without falling into the belief that everything has to be somebody's fault. Often a loss we are struggling to accept in the present helps us to deal with earlier losses that haunt us. Acceptance is not an all or nothing event, and it does not necessarily happen all at once. Like so many lessons in recovery, there are less painful ways to learn, but there are not always the ones that stay with us. The more we learn about ourselves, the more we are able to work toward our own personal vision of hope. At the same time, we remember that our vision for ourselves is a fleeting glimpse of our higher power's will for us. As we pursue our dreams, we may find ourselves in places we never imagined. It is all possible, but that means we take risks and sometimes experience failure. Even when we fall flat on our face, we can get up again and move forward. That's part of the journey too. We get less and less afraid of the truth. But we do not get there by standing still and waiting for recovery to happen to us. We learn, we grow, we give, we create, and we keep coming back. A vision of hope. Learning about acceptance, love, and compassion helps us to accept ourselves without conditions. As our faith deepens, our understanding of what it means to act in good faith changes as well. We no longer use our disease or where we are in our recovery as an alibi for bad behavior. Our recovery is constantly enriched by what we learn. We make peace with ourselves, with all we have gained and lost and learned and become. We find gratitude for the events that bring us to this moment. The process is a power greater than ourselves. The reward for staying with it is feeling at peace with who we are. Self-acceptance changes over time. We learn to live with our frailties and imperfections. We find that the defects we accept and forgive are more likely to be removed than those we fight against and try to control. We can mistake the obstacles in our path for a part of ourselves. Learning to direct our attention toward our assets and goals and away from our defects and obsessions is a new freedom. We start to believe that our positive attributes are not part of a facade or figment of our imagination. Our feelings do not frighten us like they used to, and they seem to pass more quickly. We know that we may not change our feelings right away, but we can change our behavior. Mood follows action. When we do the right thing, we can start to feel better. The person we see in the mirror may bear little resemblance to the version of ourselves that other people know. When we are locked in self-obsession, we may have no idea of the damage we are doing to the people around us or even to ourselves. Similarly, when we reach out, we may not see the positive effects we have on our own spirits or the world around us. We may still see ourselves as we were when we got here, not recognizing that the principles we have been practicing have become part of who we are. We trust our sponsors and friends to show us the changes we cannot see in ourselves. Caring for our spiritual condition is like cleaning the house. If we want the benefit, the work must be ongoing. The better we do at keeping up with the daily routines, the less painful the big cleaning is when it comes, and the less often we have to undertake a major overhaul. We are responsible for our recovery, but that does not have to be an endless chore. A member shared, "There was a time when I dreaded step work. It felt like a punishment. Now I'm excited to work on my recovery because I know the steps are the road to freedom." It is not recovery that is painful. Our resistance to it is what hurts. When we step away from our recovery and act against our beliefs, that hurts. Using is about distortion. We are drawn to things that distort our perception, from drug use to resentment. Sanity is living in harmony with reality. When we are spiritually awake, we are willing to see clearly. We recognize the habits of mind that lead us back to the same feelings over and over, regardless of what's happening around us. Until we stamp it with the name excitement or fear, the feeling can be identical. Making a choice in how we describe our experience gives us a choice in how we experience our lives. Allowing ourselves to be happy can be a surprisingly long process. It always continues in one way or another. Some of us fear contentment because it might lead to complacency. Others of us fear that if we are ever content, there will be nothing left to try for. Learning what truly makes us happy can be hard, especially if our relationship to seeking pleasure was tangled up with our most destructive behavior. Finding the balance is a challenge. When I got clean, I could feel the grief of every leaf falling from the tree, a member shared. I feel like a novice at finding joy. I thought I would have to let go of pleasure to be clean. What we learn about love in the rooms prepares us for other kinds of relationships. We may find love, create families, or be restored to the families we had left behind. Some of us discover that we have talents for contributing to the world in other ways, whether through our creativity, our empathy, or our addict ability to focus on one thing and do it until it's done. The skills we learn in the rest of our lives in turn become tools we use to help carry the message. When we stay involved with NA, we can see that we have a valuable contribution to make to the world. We may not see all these changes at first, but we feel it somehow and get a glimmer of hope that our lives are changing. Desperation to passion. Once the process of cleaning up the wreckage begins, the ways that we need to grow may not be visible from the outside. We go from being totally impulsive to feeling like our decisions have to be permanent. Something has to drive us or draw us. We need a purpose, or we start entertaining ourselves with obsession and compulsion. There is something about being stuck that feels hopeless and easily turns into complacency and indifference. It can feel wrong or embarrassing to be struggling to keep the light on in our own recovery when we think we are supposed to be carrying the message to others. The responsibility we feel to carry a message can serve as an excuse not to share the truth about our lives. But without the truth, we have no message at all. And when we are not open, it is hard for light to get in. Admitting is the beginning of change. Putting the life back in our recovery is really not that hard. We look for the passion, and we nurture it. The hard part is finding the willingness to take action and pick up the phone or go to a meeting when we are feeling uninspired. There's magic and a healing grace in meetings, but we cannot see it when our attitude blinds us. Coming back to meetings after we have been gone for a while can be awkward and difficult, or it can be like coming home. There is a sweetness to walking into a room that we have not been in for some time and seeing so much unchanged. Still, meetings make more sense when we attend them regularly. When we drift in and out, they can seem dull and boring. Part of the magic comes from continuity, seeing each other grow and change, watching the miracle unfold in one another's lives. Occasionally someone shares brilliant words. More often the brilliance is in what we see, not what we hear. Passion is a lot like desperation. It is a motivating, energizing force that can propel us forward. But passion is rarely bestowed on us. It comes from within. The more we draw on our passion, the more of it we have. Making the shift from desperation to passion is a first step issue. Our journey is always just beginning, and our capacity and our need for spiritual growth is infinite. The same tools that brought us from the brink of death can continue to bring us miracles beyond measure when we learn to fuel our journey with passion and excitement rather than pain and desperation. There is a transition that happens to each of us in the process of recovery, an indefinable moment when we move from desperation to passion. Where we had been motivated by the fear of greater pain, we start to see new opportunities for growth in our struggles and become willing to move forward out of hope rather than fear. This may not be our first spiritual awakening, but it is clearly an awakening of the spirit into a new sense of possibility. Faith in the process means believing that we are moving in the right direction, even if it's not where we thought we would be going. We take on greater challenges. We stand for principles we never had before. We tend to responsibilities, even if they seem too heavy to bear. We learn that our power will help us to do what we cannot, but will not do for us what we can do for ourselves. It is surprising to find out how much we can actually handle. When we stop trying to control things we're powerless over, we learn where our power truly lies and how we can use that to make changes in ourselves and our world. We are a part of something today, but we are not just part of one thing. What we learn about unity in NA helps us to figure out how to be members of our families, members of our communities, members of a team at work or at play. We learn that we are never alone. We are here with one another and for one another. We trust that more and more as our experience grows. We can see that our actions have consequences for us and for the people around us. Denying this is a form of self-obsession. We do matter, and we want to consider how we contribute. Each time we surrender, we find once more that the desperation that drives us to our knees fuels the passion that carries us forward. When hope manifests into reality, our lives change. Our experience affirms what we believe, and belief grows into faith. When our faith grows into knowledge, the program that we once struggled to practice has become part of who we are. We find here what we have been looking for all along: connection to others, connection to our power, connection to the world around us, and most surprisingly of all, connection to ourselves. Why we stay. What is it that keeps us in NA after the initial desperation eases? Of course, there's the desire to help the newcomer. Our 12th step reminds us that this must always come first. But many of us, at some point in our recovery, have felt that perhaps that was all that was left in the rooms for us. Our commitment to help might have kept us coming back, but some of us were left with a nagging feeling that we hesitated to share. Is this really all there is? Our answer today is a resounding no. In our lives and in the lives of addicts around the world, we can see change not only from the desperate, lonely people we were when we got here, we can see great changes in ourselves and in the way we relate to others from the first time we work the steps compared to our next pass, and our next. Our experience in NA service teaches us to interact with others in environments that are sometimes stressful and to remain loving and open even as we stand our ground. We learn when it's important to stand for principles and when it's best to step aside in the name of unity, knowing that a loving God is ultimately in charge. We plan for the future, just for today, and let go of the outcome, even when we really want it. Living, loving, surviving loss, and celebrating success, we find that the tools of recovery that gave us our lives also help us to live with grace, integrity, and joy. As we practice principles, our understanding grows and deepens. There is no limit to the process. There are no limits to where recovery can take us, no limits to how much better we can get. We short-circuit our recovery when we keep a reservation in our second step by thinking that there are some parts of who we are that cannot be restored. When we accept the possibility that we can get infinitely better, that there is no end to what recovery has to offer, we begin to understand that spirituality is not just a way out, it is a way of life that will continue to bring us new gifts, new possibilities, and new awareness as long as we practice it. If we allow ourselves to be motivated not by fear of the past, but by hope for the future, we are as excited to move forward when life is good as we are when we are struggling. We have found a way in, to life, to freedom, to passion, to limitless growth. We are no longer trapped in a process driven by our own desperation. Something different happens as we move into recovery motivated by passion, hope, and excitement. We are released into our own lives. We are freed from the feeling that we must constantly be on guard. We are free to discover the capacity of our own hearts. Where we have been closed down, we have the ability to love and care for others more deeply than we had imagined. Yes, we are a vision of hope. As the basic text says, this book is about seeing that hope as something that always grows, drawing us forward throughout our recovery and throughout our lives. We don't just recover, we thrive. The NA program gives us tools for living. The work is never ending, and the rewards of living the program are ongoing as well. We work to improve our circumstances, creating and recreating a life that matches our vision for ourselves. Often the change we seek is in our ideas and attitudes. We learn to see the world more clearly. We are so grateful for the recovery we can see in ourselves and the people around us. Great rewards are always waiting for us if we are willing to make the effort. Narcotics Anonymous is a bridge to life and a path we can walk throughout our lives. The gift is freedom. Each level of freedom we experience opens us to greater freedom beyond, just as each level of awareness allows us to recognize how much we do not yet see. Although we may live very differently from one another, we share the same journey. We are so grateful to have found recovery, to be living clean, and to know wherever we are in our travels, the journey continues.